Welcome to East Texas in Focus. I'm Tyler Henderson. When you think of Texas wildlife, you think of the white-tailed deer, a mountain lion maybe, or maybe the good old-fashioned Texas longhorn. But do you ever think about the Texas horned lizard, the horny toad? And if you've ever heard of the Outwaters prairie chicken, it's unlike anything you've ever seen. Well, they're both endangered, and the Caldwell Zoo is working to bring those populations back up to where they need to be right here in our own backyard. Stick with us. We'll take you behind the scenes and show you how they're getting those animals back to where they need to be. Well, we're tucked away in probably one of the least known parts of the Caldwell Zoo, right by the Wild Bird Walkabout, where all the magic happens in bringing this Texas horned lizard population back into our own backyard. We're going to go inside and talk to the experts who see it all from start to finish. Let's go inside. All right, we're inside the Horned Lizard Conservation Center with Dallas Goodwin, one of the reptile keepers here. Dallas, you're in charge of a lot of the day-to-day in here. So talk to me about what some of your everyday tasks are taking care of these awesome critters.
Yeah, so right now they just came out of hibernation, so they're all inside because it's a little bit chilly out still. So just come in, we turn on their heat lamps every morning, make sure everybody looks good, and then we'll count out ants for them actually. They just started eating a few days ago. They're pretty good eaters, already eating about 75 each every single day. And then the females in the peak of the summer will eat anywhere from like 100 to 150 every day. So they're just ramping up for the season.
All right, we get along just fine, I would think. Now, these two different sets of aquariums here, that's a huge part of this process because they start out little in these bottom ones, correct? And then as they get older, they'll move into the top and go outside. So talk to me about the importance of that because these are breeding pairs of these horned lizards. That's what this conservation effort's all about. Walk me through that process.
Yeah, so probably at the end of next week, we'll start actually pairing these adults you see behind us. And fingers crossed we have some good success. And then in about 50 to 60 days, they'll lay eggs. They'll lay them outside. We'll go out, we'll dig them all up, and then we put them in this special incubation tray, and then we put them in the incubator that's in the building also. We'll watch those for anywhere from 50 to 60 days, and then they'll start to hatch. And when they hatch, they'll come into these tanks behind us, and we'll watch them from anywhere from like 2 weeks to 4 weeks. And then usually beginning of November, we release them out into a release site with Texas Parks and Wildlife to go out and start, hopefully establishing a population out there.
Absolutely, and I'm looking at them just in awe the couple times that I've gotten to come in here. And for those of you at home, I haven't seen a horny toad since I was a little bitty kid. And I imagine that's probably the sentiment of a lot of our viewers too. So what you're telling us is this thing is working. It's working well.
Yeah. We actually, last year at the release, we went out and the biologist we work with actually showed us, radio tagged one of our females that actually hatched from the year before. So she survived, she was huge, and then fingers crossed the next year she was able to contribute to the breeding population. So that's really awesome.
That's awesome. And it's all happening right here in our backyard. Tyler, if people don't know, this would have been a hot spot for them a long time ago, but correct me if I'm wrong, the population of fire ants, things like that, really took the population of these guys down. So it's so important to build it back up. Now, a lot of people haven't seen one up close. Is there a way that we could take a look at one of them and take a look at them up close and see just how magnificent they are? Because I think they're super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. I think two will come out for us. So this is one of our males. So he's not super big. He's pretty small, and he's got pretty red coloration. But yeah, the people come by all the time and used to be like, oh yeah, I used to see them all the time when I was younger, and then no one really sees horned lizards anymore. The invasive fire ant population is a really big reason that they've decreased. They eat harvester ants, and then some other bugs, but mostly just harvester ants. And so those fire ants pushing out all the other ant species has been a real damper on them. And then also just like urbanization and taking away those little sandy spots with like underbrush that they hide in can be a big problem for them also.
Absolutely, and horny toads are probably one of the coolest animals I've ever seen. I remember having them as a kid. You could flip them over on their back. I don't know if y'all do this, but you could rub their belly and they'd fall asleep. That's what we used to do, is catch them and This is a little trick we had. But, you know, with all the spikes, they also have another pretty cool defensive mechanism. Now, it's Mythbusters. We might have to play a little of that game, shooting the blood out of their eye sockets, right? That's a thing that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually the consensus kind of is that it's specialized for dog predators, stuff like that. They will they can increase the blood pressure around the capillaries in their eyes and basically just like bust the capillaries around their eyes, and it's their eyelids, not really their eyes bleeding, but they'll increase the pressure there, and then they can shoot it 3 to 4 feet away from them. It's pretty crazy.
So talk to me about this incubator, because once you've got to go in there and find them, and I'm pretty sure these eggs aren't that big, so it might take a little bit of time to rake through there, get them all, and put them in there. So walk me through that process and how long that takes y'all.
Yeah. So we will go out and you'll just kind of see one morning. We go out and check them every morning when they're outside. And you can take a look at them and kind of be like, you look really small. They actually shrink. One of ours actually lost 30% of her body weight laying eggs one year. So you can they look really deflated after they lay. And usually you can see a little bit of a depression in there. So you can dig around in the sand and we try and find that little burrow that they took. And usually it takes probably at least a half an hour to dig them out. We take a paintbrush and like archaeologists dig the eggs out because they are incredibly tiny. They're like the size of your pinky nail. And they're really, really fragile. So we'll go in and we'll dig them out, and then we very carefully move them out of the sand and then into our incubation tray full of special substrate, and then we'll bring them in here to our incubator that's been prepped, and they'll stay in there for 50 to 60 days.
Awesome. So just to wrap up here, talk to me about the importance of getting these guys back in the wild where they belong. Obviously, the population took a real big hit the last several years. But to be able to see it working, I mean, that's a foundation of y'all's mission. So for y'all, seeing it every day, getting to be a part of that, what does that mean to you, and what does it mean for the state of Texas to have a staple, really a Texas legend? Everybody knows about the horny toad in Texas, to be back in the wild and see them thriving.
Yeah, everyone can tell you stories about them when they were little, and everyone misses seeing them around. Being able to establish really any species back into the wild that used to be there is really an amazing opportunity and thing to be a part of. So being able to be a part of something that we have evidence that's working is really awesome.
That's awesome. We're so excited to see it right here in our own backyard. A lot of people know about it, so if you're ever at the Caldwell Zoo, make your way back here, look through the windows, see what they're doing some great things. We got some other Texas native species we're going to talk about today, but it's only fitting we start with the horny toad for all my TCU fans out there. Well, we learned about the Texas horned lizard a little earlier on in the show. We're moving on to a very different, noisier species that's native to Texas, the Atwater's prairie chicken. I'm here with Nicole, one of the supervisors here over the prairie chickens. Nicole, he's booming for us. He's putting on a show. What can you tell us about these awesome Texas birds?
Yes, he is. Yeah, so that booming that he's doing behind us, that is a courtship display that they do for the ladies. So he's doing that, calling to the ladies that are in here. They're a really cool species, so they are an endangered species. They're native to the coastal prairie areas, which would be like south of Houston, around that area. Yeah, they're a species of grouse, so fun little birds.
Absolutely. Now, obviously a ground-dwelling bird. So whenever you talk about them being critically endangered, I mean, they are one of those species had to have been impacted by fire ants, much like the horned lizard. So talk to me about the outcome for these birds right now out in the wild, because part of the conservation effort here is to get as many of them back out there. Talk to me about what they look like now.
So right now we're releasing onto different sites that are managed by U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So one of those is at Eagle Pass, which is the Atwater's Prairie Chicken Refuge. So those areas are managed, and that's where currently the population is centered in that. And then we also have one in Goliad that they manage as well. So they're able to kind of look over that area and keep it good for them in that space, since they weren't doing so hot out in the wild.
Right. And this is probably one of the lesser known Texas species as far as when you think of the Lone Star State. You think of the horned lizard, but the Atwater Prairie Chicken is probably one of the more unique ones. When we talk about his booming here, that courting ritual, he's got kind of a unique way that he does it. He does his stomp, he inflates his neck. So talk to me about that, because a regular old barnyard chicken doesn't do that.
No, they don't. So I'm sure you can hear those cool noises that they're making. So they quickly stomp those little feet, and you can hear the little noises that come when they're doing that. And then they inflate their little pouches around their neck that kind of make that nice big booming noise when they're like kind of, and you'll see them just like pushing that yellow out, and they get that really bright yellow color during breeding season. They also get some really fun yellow eyebrows that you can kind of see as well during breeding season.
He's a beautiful bird, no doubt about it. And if you ever need any help on the dance floor, I think somebody behind us has got some tips for you. Now here at the Caldwell Zoo, you don't have very many of them right now, but when you do have these runs full, I mean, we are talking about a good release project here. So what is the Caldwell Zoo's part in all of this, trying to get these birds' population back to where it was so many years ago here in the state of Texas?
Yeah, so our team raises the chicks, so we usually have 6 to 7 pairs, and we match them genetically, so that way we're producing birds that are really genetically valuable and healthy. And throughout the season, we'll collect eggs and we set them in our incubator, and once the chicks hatch, we bring them to our building, and then we get to hands-on take care of them, to kind of eliminate any of the issues we might find, just out here with snakes and things like that. Once they get bigger, we take them out and we start taking care of them in pens out here. And then after we raise them up, they select some for release, and then we send a group off, and they get released out onto the refuge.
Of course, Caldwell Zoo isn't the only AZA accredited affiliation here doing this kind of thing in the state of Texas. I mean, y'all work with places like Fossil Rim Wildlife Center in Glenroe, somewhere that's very near and dear to my heart, the Houston Zoo, and collectively, what is that looking like? Because it's got to look pretty positive as of now.
Yeah, so between us, Houston Zoo, the Fossil Rim, and also Sutton, which is Sutton Avian Research Center, which is in Oklahoma, who also participates in this, we release anywhere from like 300 birds a year.
All right. So on the up and up right now, which is absolutely what we need to see with these birds, because for my grandkids, my great-grandkids, who one day we want them to get to hear the booms of the Atwater Prairie Chicken. If you haven't heard it in person, it is really surreal, especially when he gets to going like this guy behind us. He is really trying to put on a show for us, which is a treat for us. Now, here at the Caldwell Zoo, I know they have a big release every once in a while. So talk to me about how many the Caldwell Zoo has released and hatched over the last few years.
So we usually raise anywhere from about 25 to 35 chicks. We did just recently expand our facility, so hopefully we're going to look at releasing or raising more like 40, 45 chicks. And then depending on the genetics of the chicks, sometimes we may release more, sometimes we may release less because they may go into the breeding population. But we've released anywhere from a dozen to even more each year, just depending on what they need from our chicks.
Sure, and you talk about looking at those genetics. What are some of those specific genetics that you're looking for before you re-release them and reintroduce them back into the wild? Because there's some specific things that you want to keep that population healthy once they're outside of these mesh cages.
Yeah, for sure. So when they're looking at genetics, they're going to look for birds that maybe don't have a lot of offspring in the population, and then keep those so that we can raise birds from those genetics, and maybe some that are a little more overrepresented, so maybe a pair that have produced a ton. Those chicks would usually get released because we have a lot of those genetics in the population, and we don't necessarily need to bring more into the breeding population, but out in the wild, that's totally fine. We can release more. So we kind of look at that when we're deciding what chicks get released and which ones stay in the population. population.
Absolutely, and having a new expanded facility, all a part of it. It's pretty good things happening at the Caldwell Zoo, not just for our Texas horned lizard, but these Atwater prairie chickens. And he's not camera shy at all. He's a little camera shy when we first got out here, but
now he's letting us know he's right there.
Right, he's saying, hey, you're in my turf right now. He's trying to protect his ladies back there.
That's right.
I'll tell you what, he is just the start of what's to come for bringing this population back to what it was in the Lone Star State. And the Caldwell Zoo is a very pivotal part of that. We've got more about these horned lizards, about these Atwater prairie chickens, and some more exotic species coming up on East Texas in Focus. Stick with us, we'll be right back. Well, we've seen the horny toads and we've seen the Atwater prairie chickens. So now we're going to answer some of your most pressing questions at home. We've got the curator for birds and reptiles, Yvonne, with us. Yvonne, appreciate you taking a little time with us.
Sure.
Let's get right into this thing. The first question we had was how many horned lizards have been hatched and then released from the Caldwell Zoo?
So we've hatched 102 lizards, and we haven't released quite that many, but it's really close. Some of them we've kept for the breeding programs the next years, but it's probably in the 90s.
Perfect. Yeah. It's a great deal, no doubt about it. Sticking on the Texas horned lizard now, we all know, and we mentioned it earlier, that the Texas horned lizard is kind of a Texas icon. It's a Texas, I mean, we got college mascots and all that kind of thing with the Texas horned lizard. Sticking there, when you move them outside, you talk about the cages out there that you put them in, let them get outside a little bit. What is that used for, and how long do they typically stay in there?
So when the weather gets warm enough, especially the nighttime temperature stays above 60 and get better in the 70s, we put them outside in what we call our sun tables. And so they'll stay all summer out in the sun tables because natural sunlight is so important to them for their health. And also they love to bask in the sun, so they just soak it up. So they stay all through summer, and then as we get cooler nighttime temperatures in the winter, we start bringing them back in.
That's awesome. I'm glad they get their chance to get outside and bask in the sun. I think I needed a little more. It's been winter a little too long for me. But when people come to the zoo, they can't necessarily see that, but is that in the works that visitors of the zoo can eventually see those sun tables in the long term?
Yeah, we're modifying that wall over there, so we're putting a window so that visitors can look in and see the sun tables. It'd be really hard to see the lizards on there from that viewing window, but we're working on maybe putting in some cameras so we can have a visual of those guys when they're out there basking.
And Yvonne, ending here on the horned lizards, then we'll move to the prairie chickens.
Sure.
So the horned lizards, at one point, they were all over the state of Texas. So I got one question saying, how many of these things were out in our own backyard for so many years, and then what does that population look like now?
Well, we have visitors that come and do tell us that as kids, they picked up horned lizards in this area. And when I first started here about 25 years ago, there was maybe a few left, a few pockets, because we would hear them, actually some people telling us. But since that time, we've had no reports of any in this area. So I'm pretty sure that the Tyler area has no more horned lizards left. And so, you know, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to get involved with this program, because they are such an iconic species. And visitors can really relate to it and hopefully understand that we're really working hard to be able to put these guys back and get them established in areas, and maybe one day, if we're lucky enough, get them back here in East Texas.
That would be awesome, no doubt about it. Now the prairie chickens, which you oversee as well, they're not typically from East Texas, but the first question I got is, where are they from? Because when we heard from y'all earlier, that climate and that habitat is slowly dwindling here in Texas.
It is. So they're from the coastal prairies of Texas, which is south of Houston. And there used to be, they say, about 1 million prairie chickens, and you could hear the booming from miles away. But habitat loss, ranching, you know, and also fire ants have really caused them to be just, it was down to a few hundred birds. They at one point were really critically endangered. But through the breeding efforts that we're doing with Fish and Wildlife, you know, I think we're making progress, and maybe we can get them back out into the wild for people to enjoy, because they're just really cool when you can go watch them do their dance and interact. It's neat.
We definitely got a show early on.
We did.
That's the most prairie chicken activity I've ever seen, and
Yeah.
I'm glad that he was strutting his stuff for us.
Yep.
Now, we were talking to off camera that people can help. If there are ranchers, farmers that have some land, they can help, and all they really have to do is reach out, because if they want to house these birds, that's an actual possibility.
I think so. They're working on some private ownership deals where these chickens can be released in those private areas with the landowners. And so, you know, if anybody's interested with that, they can contact U.S. Fish and Wildlife down at the Atwater Prairie Chicken Refuge and see if it's a possibility for them to partner with U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
So just like the horny toads, you can come down here to the Conservation Center. You can look in the window and you can't get very close, but you can see what's happening. The prairie chickens, not so much. And so what's the reason behind that was a question I got, why they're off exhibit here at the Caldwell Zoo.
You know, we've tried having them on exhibit, and it's kind of not the best exhibit. The really fascinating thing about them is the male and doing his dance for the hen. That's sometimes hard to get just in an exhibit. They also are, they're not the calmest chicken. And so when they get amorous and they, you know, want to do their things and to lay eggs, the hens kind of like it quiet. And so to be the most successful we can be is to have them off exhibit in our breeding facility.
I'm just saying, I need my peace and quiet
That's
too.
right.
I completely understand that. Yvonne, thank you so much for answering
anytime.
some of our viewer questions. I know it gives a little bit more insight to the inner workings of these two awesome conservation programs here at Caldwell Zoo. Stick with us. We're going to wrap up the show here in just a little bit. Stick with us. Coming up next week, we're going to move from the Lone Star State over to the continent of Africa. We're going to see some of the giant animals you can see here at the zoo that need your help in bringing those populations back to where they should be. Join us next week on East Texas in Focus.